certainly HPSG and LFG, despite all that sparring with Joan Bresnan, he could never quite decide if she was an enemy or an ally. Functional unification grammar, that's Martin Kay, a friend around the Stanford area. Construction grammar, I became really friendly with the Berkeley construction grammar people. They had to be in this club of constraint-based frameworks. Then dependency grammar crept in because he went to Denmark or something and met people who talked about it and wanted them in. And then sign-based construction grammar is a melding of HPSG with the Berkeley stuff. And categorical grammar, perceiving that there were categorical grammarians in Europe that Ivan wanted as allies and friends, they had to be in this club. Well now, categorical grammar is a straightforward, very early developed generative framework. It's composition-oriented generative. Take the little bits that the lexicon supplies and piece them together until you have a whole thing. Not expansion-oriented, start with S and expand it to longer and longer strings until you have a string of lexicons. But if categorical grammar, which really goes back not just to Ivakiewicz in 1935, but to Lesniewski about a decade before that, if that isn't a generative framework, nothing is. So constraint-based isn't the opposite of generative or anything like that. And indeed, Ivan wanted to use the term generative to cover all this. I think he meant that generative should be construed as merely explicit. Well, that's an idea from that Chomsky picked up in 1966 when he was sick of people telling him that generative grammar seemed to be about how you think of an idea in your mind and generate an utterance for it. He knew it wasn't that, so he started saying, oh, look, generative just means fully explicit. But we have a word for that. It's the word explicit. We don't need the word generative for that. We need the word generative for something that really does involve generating sets from finite starting places, invented by Emil Post in 1921. So there's some real confusion here about constraint-based and what it should possibly mean. It seems to me to be a label for an international fraternity of people doing very different things. But Sargosso and Bender bring it up again. This is the second edition of their textbook. And then bring up three frameworks that they say don't fit the dichotomy. Now it's getting even worse. They admit that it's not an exhaustive classification, constraint-based of the others. Relational grammar, they think, doesn't fit. Trio-joining grammar, and optimality theory. But look, relational grammar uses no transformations, and archaic grammar is just a highly formalized descendant of it. Relational grammar should surely be on the constraint-based side if it means anything. Trio-joining grammar is straightforward, bottom-up, composition-oriented generative grammar, analogous to categorical grammar. It clearly is in the output, but then categorical grammar should be as well. So the confusion persists. And as for optimality theory, if OT isn't constraint-based, think of all those constraints. They seem to have infinitely many of them. And a grammar is simply a well-ordering defined on that set. If they're not constraint-based, nobody is. It's ridiculous. Nobody has thought through what this is meant to mean, constraint-based. Kulikova and Jackanoff, however, pick it up with enthusiasm and say that their stuff is constraint-based as well. They're actually a little bit more sensible about the thing than the sum total of what has emerged from the Sargosso textbook and so on. But nowhere near enough. And when you turn the page, this is page 15, you turn the page and look at a diagram of the grammar that they propose is the right way to do things, and you see this. An excellent little lesson, a homework exercise in LaTeX diagram design. It took me a long, unpleasant morning. I have no idea what that means. The phonological, syntactic, and semantic formation rules seem to be generative grammars generating three quite distinct bunches of stuffed infinite sets, I suppose. And then there are all these interfaces and extra interfaces and a lexicon that kind of talks to all of the interface. I have no idea what that diagram is trying to tell me. This is box drawing of the bad old days in the 1960s and 70s when people were trying to do flowcharts of generative grammar. No, this is chaos. The distinction that does make sense, that I think people are groping at, is one that Barbara Scholz and I tried to enunciate as clearly as we could in a rather little-known paper of 2001. We distinguish GES, generative enumerative syntax, where a grammar is defined as a non-deterministic random enumerator, a finite constructed system of dynamic operations interpretable as a definition of a computably listable set, the set of all those objects that iterative application of the operations could, in principle, build. Versus MTS, model theoretic syntax, where a grammar is defined as a finite set of truth-evaluable statements interpretable as conditions that sentence structures are required to meet if they are to count as well-formed. Now, that bifurcation doesn't exhaust the possibilities. As I think we said, grammars could be formalized as transducers, which should take phonology representation as input and produce a semantic one as output, or the reverse. But these two are clearly different. And Barbara Scholz and I tried to show that the second one, which has about 2% market share in American syntax, generative GES syntax, since it includes everything that Chomsky has ever advocated, all the many different theories of transformational grammar that Chomsky has proposed, it's like a Microsoft of the syntax world. It has 98% market share, and no matter that it isn't very good and it keeps changing, it keeps the market share. Microsoft is now worth $1 trillion, by the way. Transformational generative syntax is worth somewhat less, I think. And HPSG is an undervalued stock, in my opinion. But, I've got a stray T in the word common at the top. Ignore the headline. A common error regarding Macaulay 1968, which many people have suggested to me has something to do with model theoretic views on syntax, is actually expressed in detail by Kulikov and Jakinoff in their footnote 6. They refer to Macaulay's paper on the base component of the transformational grammar. And they think that node admissibility conditions, as Macaulay called his reinterpretation of phrase structure rules, is a sort of synonym for declarative, representational, or model theoretic. And that's dead wrong. I thought it might be worth explaining why. Node admissibility conditions, occasionally I'll use the abbreviation NACs, are not necessary conditions on admissibility of either nodes or trees. This is a real misnomer. They aren't conditions on trees, they aren't conditions on nodes. Model theoretic syntax says that a grammar is entirely a finite set of constraints on structures like trees and nothing else. An NAC, Macaulay gives them a different notation. You don't need to, it's a question of the interpretation of notation. Take the one that would have been written as A, arrow, B, C. That doesn't place any condition on nodes, not even on nodes labeled A. It really amounts to a picture of a little piece of tree. doesn't place any conditions on anything, not even nodes labeled A, is that it doesn't imply that if a node is labeled A, it must have daughters labeled B and C. Because, of course, if there's another rule in the grammar that says A arrow P Q R, that's just fine, fully compatible. These are like pictures of little pieces of tree, and Macaulay, actually picking up on an idea from Richard Stanley that was given to him in 1965, was suggesting that we could see a generative grammar as a finite set of pictures of little pieces of tree that would generate all the trees that could be put together by plugging together those little pieces. Every part of the tree had to match one of the little pictures. That was the sense in which each node had to be admitted. Well, the plugging together was done by placing a frontier non-terminal. The frontier is the nodes that don't dominate anything other than themselves. Frontier non-terminals replaced by a local tree that's in the inventory of little pictures, wherever there was an appropriate root node label on one of the trees, right? So if you've got an A over B and C, and you can find any local tree that has C as its root label, you can plug it in the way shown there. That's different from Arabin Joshi's adjunction operation, which again seems to be a misnomer. It's really internal node substitution, internal non-terminal substitution. For Arabin Joshi, you can take a local tree that has a root label matching one of the non-terminals on its frontier and plug the whole of that in to replace an internal node in a tree, as shown in this diagram, where the one with Greek letters in it is stuffed in where C is in the tree on the left. And as a result, you can have stuff pushed in the middle of the terminal string. That's where the extra generative capacity comes from for tree adjoining grammars. Because of that, you can get WW, or A to the N, B to the N, C to the N, D to the N. None of this different ways of viewing generative grammars has anything to do with the cardinal principles of MTS, which Macaulay's reconception of phrase structure grammar doesn't comply with at all. It doesn't comply with any part of it. Constraints state necessary conditions on expression structure. A grammar is a finite, unordered set of these constraints, and well-formedness is determined by satisfaction by an individual expression structure of all of the constraints. The way node admissibility conditions really relate to sets of trees is one Macaulay didn't quite make quite clear. There's even a mistake in the paper where he says conjunction, and I think he meant disjunction. The formula that's got to be true in a tree to make it well formed is the one shown toward the bottom of this slide, which means every node is either the root node labeled with the start symbol, or a frontier node labeled with a terminal symbol, or it's a node satisfying the disjunction of all the node admissibility conditions, meaning does it match this picture, or this picture, or this picture, or this picture, or this picture? If you get a yes, you're okay. Macaulay didn't make that quite clear, but it is completely clear if you study it closely that node admissibility condition interpretations of context-free grammars have nothing to do with model theoretic syntax. There's some things here that wouldn't be immediately apparent, but they're quite important, especially for what I'm going to wander into now. One is that a set of tree building templates for trees, a la Macaulay, can be converted into something a lot closer to a model theoretic grammar simply by taking the complement and thus characterizing what's not in the set. Let me exhibit a case of that for you. Here's a set of Macaulay-style node admissibility conditions making a generative grammar for a little tiny one-level X-bar theory. Notice that APs have to have an A head daughter, and they can have any complement, that is an AP or a BP. BPs have to have a B head daughter, either at the end or at the beginning of the phrase. The only two places that can be, all the branching here is binary. And that's all that's allowed. So if you can build a tree using just those little local tree pictures, it's generated by this grammar. But you can sort of give a grammar for the very same set of trees that's generated by this one if you say, here are the constraints. Don't ever have an AP node dominating a B, immediately dominating B. And don't ever have a BP node immediately dominating an A. And that list of forbidden subtrees effectively says that. Now, the reason I'm being vague about whether it generates a set is not the way I would like to think of it, because it's told you what you're not allowed to do, but that doesn't tell you how many trees there are. It only tells you what the ones that exist are like. The ones that exist, according to this, always have a head lexical daughter that matches the phrase. APs have A's and BPs have B's. We know that much. That doesn't tell us whether there are infinitely many trees. It just tells you the conditions that the trees must meet. This is another thing that Barbara Scholz and I worked on a paper in 2010 where we argued there never had been a decent argument that human languages were infinite. Linguists were confusing themselves. Because generative grammars are naturally interpreted as definitions for infinite sets and were invented for that purpose by Emil Hurst, it's very natural to think, well, this applies to human languages. But what they were always doing was illicitly appealing to mathematical induction when they had no right to it. Really, the claim that a human language is infinite, has infinitely many sentences, cannot possibly be justified or falsified by any observation you ever make about any syntactic fact. Syntacticians don't work on the question of how many sentences there are. They work on what sentences are like, and so they should. So there is a difference here, but it's rather at a philosophical level. You can nonetheless see that there is an exact parallel to the previous set of positive tree building templates if you just take the complement and give a set of forbidden local trees. Now, stating a context-free grammar as a set of local trees in the Macaulay style is exactly analogous to giving a bigram description of a set of strings. We're going to descend into a canyon, a forested canyon of... Did I hear an alarm or a phone? Okay. We're going to descend into a forested canyon of formal language theory here, but we will come back out and it will end up being related to HPSG, trust me. It's exactly analogous to a bigram description of a set of strings. The bigram descriptions of strings just involve giving a finite set of strings of length 2 that are permitted, and any string in which every sequence of adjacent symbols is on the list is well formed. This defines only a very small and primitive class of string sets of strings. The SL2, strictly 2 local string sets. To be a little bit more precise, you need two end markers, one for the left-hand end, one for the right-hand end, and each bigram in the grammar either has the left-hand marker and one symbol, or one symbol followed by the right-hand end marker, or a pair of symbols. Then anything that you can match by going along the string, checking that it's legal, is in the set. Your smartphone's prompting for the next word in a text is working on something remarkably like this. If it's not SL2, it's SL3, because you can adopt any length of strings as the basis for this kind of grammar. You can have n-gram descriptions. That bigram descriptions are just the most primitive there can be. Gives you the smallest class of string sets. There's an infinite hierarchy of families of strictly k-local string sets, SL2, SL3, SL4, and so on. I sometimes think my phone is using SL3, but the point is, it has no idea what was, say, 5 words back in my text. It's just prompting on things that are very, very nearby. If, however, returning to formal language theory, if we add in the results of doing unions, intersections, and complements of SL string sets, you get a new larger class called the K locally testable string sets, LT2, LT3, and so on. They can be described, model theoretically, by allowing not just atomic propositions like you're not allowed to have S1, S2, but also disjunctions, conjunctions, and negations of such propositions. So you can say things like either AB does not occur in the string, or BC and CD do not both occur, and things of that sort. So an example of a string set that is locally testable but is not strictly local would be the set of strings that start with 0 or more A's, as many as you like. There's exactly one B, and then some more A's. You cannot describe that with a strictly local grammar, because at no point can you tell whether the B has happened yet. But you can do it. Although it contains a B seems simple, you can't do it with a strictly local grammar. You can do it with a locally testable one. Now you can ramp up the power of your description language beyond the locally testable if you add quantifiers to your description language. You go beyond propositional calculus and allow quantifiers. You can say, you can introduce a symbol meaning immediately precedes or is left adjacent to, and then you can describe a larger class of string sets known as the locally threshold testable sets. There you can verify that a certain substring occurs at least a certain fixed number of times in each string, up to a certain threshold. If you add full first order logic with a predicate that means precedes, not just strictly precedes and is adjacent to, but precedes somewhere, you can get an even larger family of string sets. It's also the one you obtain if you take the locally testable and close under union, intersection, complement, and concatenation. So it's been called locally testable with order, but it's most commonly known as star free because you can build it up thus. Every finite string set is star free. Every union of such sets is star free. Every concatenation of such sets is star free. The complement of any star free string set is star free. But that's it. You don't have the Kleene star of regular expressions Kleene. So if you gave the first order statement for all x, c of x implies that exists a y such that b of y and y is before x. You've captured the set of all strings in which any occurrence of c at any point means there must be a b somewhere earlier. Can't do that with any of the previous kinds of grammar. Finally, if you replace first order logic, let's still not rich enough for you, by weak monadic second order logic, where you could quantify over finite sets of nodes of positions in a string. There's a theorem obtained apparently independently by Medvedev in the Soviet Union, by Richard Bucci at Purdue University in the Midwest, and by Calvin Elbach around the same time, that says a set of strings can be characterized by a theory in weak monadic second order logic if and only if it is the set of all and only the strings accepted by some finite state automaton. In other words, I've been building up to an infinite hierarchy of infinite families of string sets of less and less primitive types, and we finally reach the finite state, which everybody thinks is the bottom of the Chomsky hierarchy, as indeed it is, but there's a huge richness below.